Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another P1P webinar. Really excited about what we've got going today. It's more of a fireside chat, less of a presentation, but with some really brilliant minds. We're going to be talking about enterprise SEO. Big thanks to our three guests that have joined us today, Erin Everhart, John Doherty, and Marshall Simmonds. We'll have some introductory slides for each one of those, but big thanks to them for joining us to talk about their experience in enterprise SEO, how it's sometimes different, how sometimes it's similar to any other kind of SEO for SMBs or your local businesses, etc. But really excited to talk about this with these folks. We're broadcasting live today from Boise, Idaho. That's a picture of Boise looking down at the Capitol from the old train depot, which is pretty much the whole valley. We're pretty small here. Actually, Marshall Simmonds and I are both located in Boise. Page and Power and his agency are both out of Boise, Idaho, and that's our closest to home guest we've ever had. So our first panelist I'd like to introduce is Erin Everhart. Here's Erin. This is Erin Everhart. She's the manager of SEO of Home Depot, or that was her former position, manager of SEO and digital strategy, and recently moved into a new position. So Erin, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're doing at Home Depot now?
Yeah, guys. Hey, everybody. So my name's Erin. So I've been at Home Depot for about 2 years now. I started running their content marketing program on the SEO team and really working specifically about working with all of our influencers on ways that we can get that content out to be able to increase that search presence. And I recently moved over into a new role where I'm running full media and marketing strategy for one of our 3 business lines. So now not only do I get to deal with SEO, but I'm seeing how all of the different channels interact, everything from our display advertising to our TV and our broadcast and our radio and our social and our paid search and our shopping, and how all of those channels kind of mix in together. Super interesting role. I'm really excited to talk about kind of some stuff that we've been doing on at Home Depot. Enterprise SEO is a beast of its own, as I'm sure Marshall and John can kind of agree with me on that. So really looking forward to this discussion.
Excellent. Yeah, we're really excited to have you, Erin. It's incredible you've graced us with your presence and the wealth of expertise you have. So really excited to get this going. Our next guest I'd like to introduce is John Doherty. He's the founder of Credo. He's a former employee of Zillow and Trulia, I believe, and Distilled alumni, if I'm correct. So John, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're going to bring to the table today?
Absolutely, happy to. So hi everyone, my name is John Doherty. As you just heard, I'm the founder of a company called Credo, which is getcredo.com, which is basically a marketplace to connect businesses that need to grow, focusing mostly on SMBs with digital marketing consultants and agencies. So I started that, I doubled down on that back in September or October. Prior to that, I was working within Zillow Group, the umbrella company, and was leading marketing on hotpads.com, which is their rentals-focused marketplace, and also led growth marketing, SEO and email on Trulia Rentals for about 5 months. Yeah, before that I was at Distilled working with agencies or clients, companies of all sizes, from seed stage tech startups all the way up to some of the biggest hotel chains in the world. Was one of my biggest clients. So worked on the gamut of sites, a lot of enterprise, not so much SMB, but yeah, so I've been in marketing for a number of years now, and I'm based in normally beautiful San Francisco. Today it is overcast, which is basically what our summers are like. So I am West Coast.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, John. And John is someone I really respect a lot because he's kind of done it all. He's experienced the agency setting. He's been in-house for a major enterprise. He's worked with, as an entrepreneur with his own business, with Get Credo, and connecting agencies and freelancers and clients alike. And so he's got a lot of experience, and it's great to have you here, John. So thanks.
Happy to be here.
And finally, we have my man, Marshall. Marshall is the founder of Define Media Group. He is another native Boisean. He's been in the SEO game for many more years than I and has a lot more experience than myself. So I'm very excited to have him as well. So Marshall, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Marshall Simmonds, and as it was mentioned, I'm the founder of Define Media Group. We were born from the New York Times in 2005. We've been doing search engine optimization well longer than that. I'm going on my 20th year. Next year will be 20 years in the industry. And Define Media Group works in the enterprise space. We focus on enterprise, audience development, business management. We work with the investment community as well, in a lot of venture capital deals that you may have seen in the news. A lot of our work is fairly tactical in nature, but it's also highly strategic, depending on the clients. And as the other panelists have talked about, there's always a lot of nuance to this, and that's probably what we're going to hit on quite a bit as we get into this.
Right, absolutely. Thanks for that, Marshall. And actually, I believe that really dovetails great into our next question. Oh, this is me, by the way. I'm Nicholas Chimonas. I'm the head of research and development at Page One Power. I work a lot with the enterprise level clients that we have, focusing mainly on technical SEO. That's kind of my area of expertise and how SEO bleeds into web development and that kind of thing. But I'm mostly just your moderator today, here to push the conversation along with three much smarter people than myself. So, Marshall, I'd love you to start this question off of, as you have probably the most experience in SEO, 20 years beyond, any of the rest of us here, and how Define Media Group came about. I would love for you to open up this question.
Yeah, there was, publishing more or less woke up to SEO, I want to say in around 2004, 2005, and the New York Times was really instrumental in starting that. Before then, I was working at About.com, but even before that, I worked at a company called MMG in Bend, Oregon, and we actually launched, and this is going to date me, but we helped launch the Pentium and the Pentium 2 processor. The marketing group that we worked with were focusing on SEO across the top 12 search engines back then, and we, so there was even focus in enterprise as long ago as 1997, and so with that, I joined About.com. About was one of the premier content plays that had over 850 guides and 250,000 different topics that they covered, and they were instrumental in focusing on SEO in the very beginning, and this was 99 when I joined them, and so enterprise has been around for a long time. It's evolved, and most notably when the New York Times purchased About.com in 2005, they were one of the early publishers that really started taking it seriously. And serious in the sense that they started integrating it into day-to-day workflows and content creation and working with editorial teams and technical teams that were really focused on implementing and executing best practices, which before had just kind of been an afterthought.
And that was in 97.
That was 97, and then 2005, About.com was purchased by the New York Times.
It's really interesting to me that you saw that evolution occurring in 97, where SEO is becoming a serious thing, where they actually want to integrate it into the day-to-day processes of their content development, of how they technically design things, because even today, that's still a struggle we have with our enterprise level clients is getting through the layers of the organization, and evangelizing SEO is something that is important and should be taken into consideration for the PR team, for the content team,
right.
And all of these, all these different moving parts.
And that's job security, right? Is because the evolution of it, but also because we're the evangelists, and we have to be the voice of search and audience development. And so that's never going to change, because Google continues to move those goalposts, which just make our job as translator and evangelist, and that makes it that much harder, better, and continues to employ all of us, because there's a lot of moving parts. And then you throw enterprise into that, and all the different moving departments that are vying for resource and development time. And so yeah, that's the dance.
Right. And I think that's, thank you for that answer, because I believe that sets the stage very well for some of the nuances we'll discuss in later questions. I'd like to move this question to Erin Everhart now, kind of transitioning into your background, Erin, with Home Depot, what you were doing before Home Depot, and what that transition was like moving into an in-house role, controlling that large of an organization's SEO strategy.
So I, very much like anybody else, just kind of fell happenstance into SEO, right? No one really goes to college for SEO. No one wakes up and
Right.
dreams about being an SEO when they're like a little 5-year-old girl. No one does that. I was, determined that I was going to be the editor of Rolling Stone. I was a journalist. I was a writer. Music journalist. Did the whole concert thing. Did the whole travel thing. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was totally dead set on doing. I first learned about SEO in one of my journalism classes at University of Florida, because we were talking about integrating keywords into your headlines in order to get your headlines to rank higher and for people to read them. And immediately that was just so fascinating to me, right? I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes absolute sense. So I became so much more interested in getting my stuff and my articles published online than I was actually getting the clips in the newspaper and magazine that you're so used to being able to see. I graduated and I moved into book publishing for a little bit and quickly realized that I did not want to be a book publisher or an editor for a while. And to be totally honest, the journalism industry was going through some hard times when I was finishing school. There wasn't a lot of money to be had. There wasn't a lot of work to be had anyway, so I had to really figure out, okay, what else am I going to do, because I got to eat this week, right? So by pure luck and sheer coincidence, I had interned at a web development company when I was in school, and I reached out to my boss at the time there, and I said, hey, I need a new job. Can you write me a recommendation? He's like, I'll do better than that. I'll just go ahead and hire you. And I'm like, wow, that's definitely better than a recommendation.
Convenient.
So I started very convenient. Yeah, I want to say it's always been that easy, but I don't think it always is. So I started in web development and design, and I didn't know anything about it, and so I had to teach myself HTML, teach myself CSS, and understand just becoming a webmaster of a site itself, right? And that then kind of I just started learning about SEO. I started doing more SEO for our existing clients and trying to sell it as an add-on service to our web dev clients as well, right? Hey, we're going to go do this great website. Now, how about we, put some keywords in your title tags and do some keyword research and optimize your content so you can actually rank for said website. Very quickly, we realized that clients were going to pay for this quote-unquote SEO thing, shocking, and it really just kind of dovetailed into that. So, after 4 years or so, I built that marketing department at the agency where we were running SEO and content marketing and a lot of lead gen stuff as well for both the agency itself as well as a handful of different clients. Everything from Cox Media Group and Auto Trader to Microsoft to, to some small and medium-sized businesses as well, right? We worked in recruiting aspect and stuff. It was really cool. Got a whole gamut of things from there. From that, that's when I moved over to Home Depot. About 2 years ago, started doing and running their content marketing program at Home Depot, so working specifically with our third-party influencers, what content we can create, where will that content get published, and how can we ultimately drive links back to HomeDepot.com. There's this whole myth that people think large companies don't have to link build, and that's totally crap. It's completely false, right? Yes,
Sure.
we are very blessed to have a brand name and to have people talk about Home Depot, but we still have to link build and we still have to understand what is it that our customers are searching for and how can we get our content published in those areas that they're looking for it as well, right? So it was a really big focus of my business or my job then, and then I ran the full SEO strategy from the on-site stuff and integrating with our creative team and working with our tech team for the site itself in a handful of our departments, right? And Marshall was talking about this a little bit. It's really integrating with all of the different teams that you have to. SEO sucks in the way that you are responsible for the website and but you don't really own anything on the website, right? There are so many different people who could make changes to the site or make changes to anything, and your KPIs are going to be affected of it, and you may not even know what they did from the first place, right? So that was always a really big tricky thing, and it's still a tricky thing, just kind of talking about, hey, this is why you should 301 redirect things, or this is why you can't just change the URL of our appliances landing page, right, for example. So a lot of it is herding cats. A lot of it is getting face-to-face and being in those meetings where they're making these big decisions about the business. And now my role is thinking about, really on a broad level, how does SEO fit into, you know, the full marketing funnel, which sucks. I hate the marketing funnel, but you know, that's kind of what we're working with right now. How does that interact with all of the other channels out there, right? How can I frame my SEO strategy to better support what I'm doing on social, what my content looks like, what OLAs are kind of running out for everything else?
Sure. Yeah, and that's a lot of really good points you raised that I think we'll discuss a lot more in depth later too. But really the idea that collaboration between the different departments for SEO is optional is false. It's non-optional. It's an absolute, you know, requisite to SEO success, and opportunities left on the table. That enterprise business doesn't equal every link just rolling in or every opportunity being capitalized on. There's still opportunities left on the table when you're not deliberate about that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction, Erin. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and it's really interesting too. I think there's a lot of SEOs I've spoken to that started out with a journalistic endeavor, right? Or they got a degree in writing or journalism, and that was ultimately their goal. But that entire that landscape has shifted with the rise of digital media and how much traditional journalism jobs have changed. And I think a lot of journalists have found themselves in marketing and SEO or PR and that kind of thing. So let's move on to John. And
yeah,
John, or go ahead, Erin, share your final thought before we move on.
I was just going to say, speaking of journalists specifically, it's a great way to get really cheap and good labor, you know, so if you're looking for content writers and you're looking for editors out there, which as SEOs I know you are, hire journalism students. They're hungry for work, they want to write, they can write. Really good opportunity to get those people in the ground for you.
Right, and you can teach them SEO, and this is a philosophy we have at Page One Power as well. Is if you can hire great creatives and great writers and journalists, you can teach them, you know, how all of this stuff fits into the digital web and the SEO picture, and teach them a little bit about title tags, and that stuff can be learned probably easier than trying to teach someone to write well or understand journalistic approach to outreach and that kind of thing. So John, let's get your story of your background. We mentioned a little bit about that you started out at Distilled, I believe was kind of the beginning of your professional SEO career, and moved into the in-house role and ultimately in your marketplace that you've launched.
So actually my story goes back a little bit, goes back before Distilled, and I didn't realize this until just now, but Erin's and my stories are actually fairly similar in that, so I was actually trained as a web developer in college, as a technical writer and a web developer, and worked for a company summer 2007, I think, as a web developer intern, like webmaster intern, so-called webmasters at that point, and kind of got a lot of experience there. And then I actually ended up helping to run a book publishing company when I was living abroad in Switzerland, working directly with the founder, and basically we were publishing English language books. But I was living in French-speaking Switzerland and had no budget to go to conferences and such, so had to figure out how do I market this stuff. So I found online marketing. I found SEO. I had been a blogger for years, and so kept doing that, and then moved back to the States summer 2010, and actually got a job kind of in-house. It was at a demand generation agency that ran their own websites in the for-profit online education space. So actually, my first full-time SEO job was building links in the for-profit online education space, and then started their content marketing programs and all that. And then, yeah, I moved on to Distilled from there, and it was really at Distilled that I started getting a taste of enterprise SEO. As I said, I basically helped run the SEO strategy for one of the largest hotel chains in the world for about 18 months. Worked with some big content publishers that had been adversely affected by by Panda and those sorts of things. And really found that sort of work interesting because there are so many different moving parts. As Erin said, it's both interesting and completely frustrating that there are so many moving parts. But a lot of the changes that you make, you make them at scale, in aggregate, and that can actually have a huge effect because you have a really strong domain and that sort of thing. You can test things really quickly, see what's working, roll it out, and keep going. And I really bill myself as a growth marketer now because I want to work on the channels that are really moving the needle, and I want to test things quickly, get them implemented and test them quickly, which plays really well to my background as a web developer. And yeah, so then I moved in-house. After being at Zillow for 2.5 years, I moved in-house. I was hired by Zillow to run marketing on their brand HotPads, which is their rentals-focused marketplace. It's a startup that they acquired near the end of 2012, and I joined them October 2013 as their first marketer in a couple years. And over the next few months, turned around their SEO and from there built out a team. And so basically I was doing a lot of what Erin's doing now at Home Depot, where I had an SEO manager, PR manager, content manager, email marketing manager, and then a few guys full-time building links. And so really integrating all the different channels. And at the same time was also able to get a growth marketing product team put together. So basically we had 4 engineers dedicated to growth and specifically to SEO and email. And that taught me a lot, and I learned a lot of that from the Zillow team, who I worked very closely with, about kind of the way that they've structured things and how they're able to get a lot done, run a lot of tests and that sort of thing for SEO. And it was also within Zillow that I learned just the power of having the evangelism of SEO from the top. So I think a lot of enterprise marketers and enterprise SEOs specifically are dealing with a little bit more old school leadership, where they came from the pre-internet days, and they don't really get the digital part of it. We were very lucky at Zillow in that the founders and the executive team, the current executive team, they value SEO so highly. So SEOs there within Zillow Group are just, their word is taken as bond, and they're kind of treated like rock stars, which is fantastic. You hear,
and that's pretty unique for an enterprise business.
Absolutely. I mean, their CEO, Spencer Raskoff, he's just a great guy, super smart guy. He was on NBC a few months ago, probably 6 months ago, and they asked him what are 3 of his biggest regrets with building, like, over the last years of Zillow going on, and one of them was that they didn't start doing SEO earlier. So he just, like, the whole team just espouses SEO so hard, and it's built, huge businesses for them. And so it was really cool kind of learning how they did it, and then kind of replicating those successes, and now using them as I consult with some clients of my own, alongside building my own company. But it's funny because I've worked across the gamut of companies, but it's really the enterprise that I find to be super interesting because of all of its unique challenges, which I think Marshall and Erin covered really well. But they're big problems to unravel. And that's what we do as SEOs. We kind of reverse engineer problems, figure out what's going on, figure out why it might not be working, and then kind of put together some hypotheses and move towards that. And if you have the right teams in place, the right resources, the right engineers, that sort of thing, you can really make some magic happen.
Right. Well, thank you for that introduction, John. And yeah, I mean, it's very clear you've experienced all the different gamut of all these different things, and I think it's pretty standard and uniform that most people do not just begin working with enterprise level businesses. Generally speaking, they've gone through some, kind of gauntlet of learning on smaller businesses and working their way up, maybe some agency experience, and that's their first real actual exposure to all of the bureaucracy. But then it's so typical that every enterprise level experience is kind of the same. It's you always have the miscommunication between teams, or like Erin said, to like herding cats or pushing through bureaucracy to make a change happen. I mean, something that I thought was pretty interesting was Will Critchlow's post on the Moz blog just last week, where he was talking about, it was a survey he did of technical SEOs at enterprise level companies, and it was, he said something like, what was the percentage? I have it up here. 40% or more of the survey respondents said that their highest priority technical change has been waiting to be implemented for over 6 months, and they don't anticipate seeing deployed for at least another 6 months. That's typical. That's the like very typical enterprise level organization. And so it's really interesting to hear you say that at Zillow they're that agile because SEO has successfully been evangelized through the organization.
Yeah, totally. And reading that post and I also, contributed to that from my experience working in-house. It was not a surprise to me, but it also just makes me wonder, like, what are the real reasons why people are not able to get things done in-house? And I think there are so many different reasons, but also makes me wonder, like, how long do these people stick around in-house? If your biggest things aren't getting implemented. And I completely get the priorities and other things going other priorities within the company, other teams working on things, like the strategic vision of the company, and by no means does SEO, guide or control any of that, right? We kind of come along and partner, but it just makes me really wonder, like, how are in-house SEOs so inefficient and so ineffective in getting things done, or does that go up higher through through the organization, through the marketing org or whatever? Is it a systemic thing? I don't know, and I think it depends. There are so many different ways that that it can be, whether SEO is within the marketing org or within the product org, or who they're having to beg resources, beg engineers from, or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
John, John, it may not just be the whole inefficiency or just the prioritization, right? I mean, I can completely agree to that testament that it takes a long time to get anything done, and we have just a whole backlog of items that we want to get done to the website from a tech standpoint. But sometimes I think about this and I wonder, are people just not pitching it correctly, right? I mean, if you're doing an enterprise level, if you're going in there and pitching a product or pitching a project to work on, you have to be able to back it up with, this is how much money it's going to make you over 1 to 5 and 10 years. And those are hard forecasting numbers to go in there, right? Like, I can't just walk into our tech team and say, hey, listen, I'm going to implement and I want to do a whole URL rewrite. They're going to be like, you're crazy. We're not going to be able to implement that. But if I can show them that this is going to make them, $10 million in 5 years, or whatever else that money may be, that's how you actually get things done. So I don't want to totally blame it on the inefficiencies of the enterprise or the inefficiencies of the scale and the priorities, because, and I just think that some people aren't really good at pitching the process of what they want to get done, right? Like, oh, I feel like this is going to make a difference. Well, feeling like it's going to make a difference isn't really going to make a difference. Like, I need hard numbers if I'm going to prioritize anything that I have to be able to do. So I think if you're working in enterprise SEO, you have to start understanding how to relate what you're going to do to not only visits, website visits, but to revenue on your online, and even harder, in-store traffic, right? With Home Depot, our .com business is a big key portion of it, but it's only a sliver of how much we do overall. We're an $88 billion company, and the vast majority of that is coming from our in-store sales. So I have to think about, how am I going to translate .com tactics to in-store visits that it's really, really hard to measure unless I can, cookie everyone who walks into our store.
Right. And I found this to be exactly true. And this is a perfect segue into our next question, which is, what are the key differences in SEO at the enterprise level? And we found this to be very true, that, one of the most important things we can do is understand who we're speaking to in the organization. So if it was you, Erin, if you were our point of contact at Home Depot and you were an agency client of ours, then, we need to understand who the stakeholders are and what their goals are very specifically. What numbers are they looking at that they're going to judge SEO campaign success, or define those and be very straightforward about it. These are exactly the metrics we're trying to impact. These are the specific goals. This is how we can measure the ROI, and actually quantifying everything is really the only way I've seen to be effective at communicating with those who will judge the effects of SEO but aren't necessarily SEO experts. If we're not blessed enough to work in a Zillow organization where the higher ups completely believe and understand exactly how SEO works, and they know all the caveats of it and all of that. So Marshall.
This is Marshall talking. I would say to kind of add on to that, which I would say that part of what we want to do is find out what motivates those people as well. And so, I think it's important to find the KPIs. It's also important to find out what motivates them. So, like Erin said before, as a journalist, their reputation is what was motivating her, or actually what intrigued her about SEO. That's very similar to editorial teams, large editorial teams. When you put in front of them what could happen if they actually work through the SEO process, integrate it into the workflow, do the time to do the research, to understand their target market, to understand their audience, how their audience is relating to the content. That's a really strong first step. Tech is different than that. Upper management loves to see, well, I don't know if they love to see, but they're motivated but when the competition is outpacing them on a certain target market or a story or a product that they should be, finger quotes around should be, but they should be ranking for. There's different motivators for each company and for each department. Tech is way different. Product is way different. Product is just highly about communication and making sure that you're staying in the loop of any new initiatives or releases. Tech is different, where they like to see the latest and greatest, and they're very interested. And sometimes they're too motivated to integrate new technologies. There's a lot of times where, and the same with design, where they want to see how to present the data or present content in the easiest, quickest, the coolest, slickest way, and sometimes at the cost of what we're trying to do with search. And so again, a lot of different motivators, finding that motivation, and then catering to that, and then appealing to that process, and then getting integrated is essential.
Right, and that's that integration aspect. That's one other thing that comes to mind, and we've alluded to this a little bit, that it's very important. And Marshall, I'm really curious on your perspective on this too, since you mentioned this is something that's been at the forefront of your mind since 1997. Even then, you recognized the importance, or even worked with companies that could recognize the importance of integrating the different departments and moving parts. What have you found? I mean, that's obviously a key difference between an SMB, where it's relatively siloed, or maybe less siloed and everything. It's easy to get through different communication layers of the organization. But at the enterprise level, and you have these different teams, getting them to work together and understand these aspects, and evangelizing SEO and all of that is so important. What in your experience have you found to be unique challenges and obstacles to accomplishing that goal, and what have you found to be effective at accomplishing it?
Yeah, large organizations, there's going to be, inherently there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of internal, there's a lot of internal either hurdles, obstacles, or just maneuvering, and so it's always, I found that the undercurrent, the most important part of all this, the rudder, if you will, is the training aspect, and keeping everybody educated and keeping front of mind around search. Because even yesterday I was having the conversation. I'm still deeply embedded with the New York Times, and they continue to come to the this epiphany, this understanding that SEO touches everything, and that's great that they're continuing to think about it. But it really does. And so when we've always found that being highly communicative with certain the certain managers or point people in those various departments has been pretty successful, and either helping them to achieve whatever their particular KPIs or their goals are on a quarterly or yearly basis has been very successful. Integrating it with reporting to show either the where we've come up short or whether we're excelling, to make everybody look good, or just basically to use that as a carrot or a stick, and to get people interested. We've done that quite a lot, where we've shown the breakout of the different verticals within the New York Times, where movies does exceedingly well, maybe real estate isn't, and highlighting that in reporting and showing that across the company has been very effective as well. But again, the underpinning of course in all this is training, because again, the goalposts are moving so often that it requires that interpretation, and it requires us to be that evangelist. And so whenever something new comes out, whether it's AMP that just came out, or even some of the rich cards that were just announced at Google I/O, that requires a point of view and where the opportunities are, and then that's your entry point into those various departments, to make them aware of this and to get it into the technical roadmap so you can get those new changes implemented if it makes sense.
Right. Or, if you can if your point of contact is in a position within the organization to affect change or communicate the necessity of this change to whoever can, and if they,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all.
I think that's a really important point, the necessity of that change. Quite often, and if anybody has seen me speak, I rant on this quite a bit, but just because Google says to do something isn't a very good product strategy.
Absolutely.
Isn't a good SEO strategy. And so what might work for some companies might not work for others. And so when Google announced that if you went secure, you would see a ranking boost, everybody ran to do it.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily...
How many people switched to HTTPS and lost traffic because they were 301 redirecting all of their URLs?
And it's smart. It's the right reason, but Google has the wrong messaging around that. And so that, and mobile friendly was another one where Google says to do this, and people run out just because they say so. And part of being a seasoned audience development specialist or SEO is to look at it, to take into consideration your network, your content, and whether or not that's a viable strategy. Because I don't know about you, but over the past 20 years, we've done a lot of product rollouts because Google has asked or put something in front of us, and it's gone unsupported. I mean, if you're dealing with Google News, that happens all the time. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be very careful about weighing the cost and looking at the cost-benefit analysis of trying to drum up support, writing tickets, getting tech to put resources against it, which is money, and to have it not result in a quantitative raise in traffic or sales. And so that's part of what we need to do, is look at this and really be able to measure if this is an important initiative enough to put resources against it.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of my biggest qualms with technical SEO auditing in general, is the amount of checklists out there where the only audit really is just a list of checks, and it's going through and saying pass, fail, whatever. But there's no critical thinking about the uniqueness of every site, and especially at the enterprise level when you're dealing with very large sites or very complex architecture, that some blanket recommendations might not necessarily make sense, or that the development time required far outweighs any potential benefit, and there's not really even an ROI to these implementations, and then you're going to lose the trust of the development team. You're going to lose the buy-in, and I think being able to prioritize which technical changes are really the most important makes a lot of difference in how effective you're going to be. And this is something really, John, I'd actually like to talk to you about as well and have you kind of weigh in on this, and Erin too. But John, specifically, you were saying, what was that conversation you were on Twitter just the other day about, being tactical versus strategic, and does it really make sense to recommend these sweeping title tags or very, tedious title tag changes or H1 tag changes, and kind of where that conversation stemmed?
Totally. Well, first of all, I mean, I think Marshall's point about if it makes sense was a bit understated, and I think needs to be really emphasized in that, as you just said, you can lose the trust of your engineering team or of the people that you're working alongside with to to get things done if you prioritize things wrong. And so this is really the importance of having someone someone senior to be getting that buy-in across the organization, and really having a full idea about what is needed and what are all the different projects that you can do, so you can come alongside and partner with them. And if you're for example pushing for you think you need to change all of your URLs, but that's going to take a ton of time, and you can't prove all of that, that shouldn't be the only change that you're trying to get done, right? You should have like 10, 15, 20 different projects that you'd like to get done that you can that you can work on at different times as different teams, as the product team or the engineering team or whoever is refactoring things or rolling out new changes, or you can test it on a small scale with a new product or something something like that. I think that's really one way that you can get things done on the enterprise level, partnering with these different teams. And if you want to make URL changes across the site, just make build those new URLs for this one new section of the site that someone's already working on, and then prove that it works, and and then make the argument for rolling it out across the site. But to your point about and that conversation I had going on Twitter earlier this week, what I was really talking about there, and I think I didn't do a good job of explaining it, is
when
I'm working Yeah, exactly. 140 characters, right? When I'm working with enterprise level sites and I see, audits that other people have done, or like the internal team has done, and there are huge, like, just structural issues, with the site, crazy stuff going on that, like literally millions of extra pages, and then I look at an audit, and they basically have like, I've seen too many where they have like 4 or 5, they look at like 4 or 5 main pages and make super tactical recommendations about how to change the title tag on that one page to maybe rank a little bit better.
Right.
And that just drives me completely crazy because sure, it's a little thing that that you can do if your CMS even allows it, which a lot of consultants don't even understand. Like I was talking to this client recently, and they basically said we had this recommended, and I looked at them, I was like, are you even able to change individual title tags? And they're like, well, no. Okay, like what like seriously, why are we recommending this? If it's not actually going to get done. However, and I qualified this within that conversation, that thread on Twitter a little bit later, was I am full on in support of like large scale title tag changes or whatever. Those can have a huge impact, right? Cleaning up URLs on a section of the site or or whatever. Those can have a huge impact on on enterprise level websites. But like the super tactical, reorganize this title tag on this one page to do this. I'm like, that's great, but A, they can't do it, and B, what about these 5 million pages that we shouldn't even have in the index that are, eating up 3/4 of our crawl budget? Like, let's solve that one, right? And there are going to be a bunch of changes in there, and we're going to do title tag changes and, URL changes and all of that sort of stuff. But like, let's kind of pick our battles here. And since we have, limited engineering time, right? Which, as Marshall pointed out, is that's real money right there, right? You're paying people salaries, and the time that they're spending working on that is time that they're not spending working on something else. Since you're spending that, like, you need to prioritize what you think is going to have the biggest effect, which is exactly why I love it when I work with clients that have a dedicated growth engineering team that they're basically charged with this, because as Marshall said, SEO is a moving target, right? And that's job security for us. It's also frustrating when engineers or product people just want to roll it out and forget about it and go do something else. You have to be going back, you have to be measuring, you have to be tweaking. We're optimizing, right? The O in SEO is optimization, right? And that's not like necessarily new things. That can also be going back and tweaking things and making changes. And on an enterprise level, you do it on a large scale, and it can have a huge effect.
Right.
So that's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at there.
Well, I think you touched on an incredibly important point, which is that developers and SEOs ought to be more integrated. And really it speaks, SEOs complain a lot about, oh, we're just caught in this backlog of the devs. But I think that, a truly talented technical SEO has a much more solid understanding of web development. They understand the time implications of any given recommendation they're giving and how to prioritize effectively too. Like you said, here's a simple technical fix that's going to really affect crawl budget and resolve all these, millions of unnecessary dynamically generated pages or whatever. This parameter needs change. Simple things that are pretty quick for a dev team to implement that will actually be, much more effective and important than going through and tedious changes. Well, we can't actually rewrite every individual URL right now, et cetera. And so I think that's pretty important.
And even small things.
Yeah, Erin,
just like knowing how to write a JIRA.
Your opinion on this too.
Yeah, I mean, just small, really things like knowing how to write your JIRA ticket, knowing how to write your story, so you have all of the requirements in there, so that the dev team doesn't have to hassle you or come find you down. You make it as little work for them as possible, so they say, hey, yep, these are all the requirements. This is, I know exactly what I want to do. This is what's going to be defined as a success, and they can start working on it immediately. But if you put in incomplete information, and if you just don't know how to present things in the format that they're looking for, they're either going to pass it up, or it's going to take even more time for them to hunt you down and find it. And this went back to you're going to lose trust in that dev team really, really quickly, right? Knowing how to code and knowing that back-end stuff is equally as important, but putting it in the context of how they need it and eliminating any running around herding cats moment, that's going to be where you're finding success from a tech standpoint. Same thing with the test and learn approach, right? I mean, you talked about it yourself. You're never going to go in there and rewrite 100 or 1,000 different URLs. because it's just not scalable. It's going to be so much work. But if you go in there and say, listen, you know, we did this with our redirects years and years ago. Why don't we test redirecting these 5 pages, right? Properly 301 redirecting these 5 pages, and let's just see what happens. Meanwhile, we knew it was going to happen, right? You know you're going to be able to see a lift from that, but redirecting 5 URLs versus redirecting 150,000 URLs was a much easier process, and something they could chew on that a little bit better. And when they see the results from this very small test, that gives you the leverage and the legs to stand on to roll it out site-wide. I mean, everything has to be small test, and then let's go from there, because you'll always get into the habit or the argument that, oh, well, we've never done it that way before, or that's not how we do it here at fill in the blank company, right? You have to figure out, well, I get we've never done it this way, or I get we never did it this way before, but this is why we need to do it this way now because of this expected lift, which will translate back to revenue.
Right. And this is, you know, this is a perfect segue into our final question, which is how do you plan projects at the enterprise level? And this is a unique stage of the planning process, at least in my experience. It's unique to working with enterprise companies where you get a lot more pushback on any given idea you give, right? And like Marshall mentioned earlier, you need to quantify any idea as to why this is a good idea, what you believe the forecasted impact is going to be. But I think enterprise level SEO really keeps SEOs a lot more honest. It makes us run tests to prove our point, run small scale tests and say, great, we actually experimented, we observed the SEO impact, and taking a much more scientific approach to SEO, which I think is really wise to do for any site. I mean, with a smaller site, it's easier to just jump the gun and do everything. But you know, at the enterprise level, this is part of the planning process, is actually developing the idea, quantifying the impact, what you believe the impact will be, and then running a test to prove it. And once you've proven it, or a lot of times, you know, you'll get pushbacks as well, you know, does this really make sense? And you have to, you know, prove it with previous case studies you have or previous data or examples you have. And then you can actually push the project forward because it has weight to it. But what, you know, what other unique differences are there to you at planning projects at the enterprise level within Home Depot?
So I try to think about things in terms of the calories it's going to take to implement the project. So it is the lift and it is what you're going to be able to get from there, but I decompartmentalize things in terms of, hey, this is a really big rock, right? Like this is going to be a 5-year project or a 2-year project. It has to, we have to rewrite our code base, or I have to get buy-in from, you know, 1,500 people or whatever it may be, right? It's a really big rock. So I have those kind of in a future, would love to do this kind of thing, but know that this is kind of where we need to go. Conversely, if there's things that I can do in a day or I can do in 15 minutes, that's a really quick change, and that's still going to get a good incremental lift, like I want to be able to tackle all those little things, right? So it's a really big just puzzle and kind of Tetris match to figure out, right? Like I know I need to be able to move these big rocks forward slowly, but I have to still, I know that I can make these small changes within a week or however long it takes, and I can still get a return from there itself, right? So it's not just 5 million projects or 10 million projects. It's like, how many calories is this worth, right? Like, am I going to bother somebody else on another team for harping on this particular thing over and over again, or are they going to understand where it's coming from? Like one of the best examples I can think of happened recently was we created a Father's Day gift ideas page, and we did that in order to target the Father's Day gift giver who has no idea what they want to get their dad or their husband or the man in their life for Father's Day, right? You know, they have to get something, but they still don't really know what's going on. And it's a lot of search terms when it comes to Father's Day gift ideas, specifically around June. And when we were thinking about it, we were saying, okay, you know, we know that we already have all of this content that we could put on this page. We know that it's not going to physically cost any dollars to be able to create this page. The only thing that we had to do was engage with our creative team to say, hey, listen, all of this content lives in kind of separate places here, here, and here. We have merchandising buy-in based off of these are the products that they want to feature on that page, and we packaged it up for them and basically just gave it on a platter and said, can you create this page? And they're like, wow, this actually doesn't take a lot of effort at all. We can totally stand that page up for you, right? So that's how I plan projects, is I know that this exists, or I know that I can get these resources from someplace else, and I know that it'll be a quick win. I want to be able to do that first so I can at least check something off of my to-do list, or if not, right, you're going to have just this whole long list of things that are going to be sitting in your backlog for years, and you're not going to be able to make any movement on it. So that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to planning things.
Prioritize by path of least resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is John. I was just going to say that I think that's really an awesome way to do it, because that's both you know, a tactical test, and it's also very strategic in that you know, you can also get them to build out this template that then you can go and you can do it for, you know, other sorts of, like, you know, father Christmas gifts and those sorts of things, right? And you're kind of setting a precedent for moving this stuff you know, forward over time as well, in that you've already gotten by and you've proven that it can work, right? You're coming back and you're reporting on it and saying, this is how we ranked, this is the revenue that we drove, and then that's, you know, definitely you can make that argument time and time again and continue to move the business forward.
Right, and that's a flywheel.
Oh my gosh, reporting on it,
momentum, right?
Completely touched on the reporting on it aspect. Yeah, sorry, Nick, like anything that you do, guys, like any project that you plan, John's totally right. Don't just set it and forget it, right? Report back. Even if it wasn't as great as you guys expected, right? What did you learn from there? Share those numbers. That's a big problem that we have. Like, people are never going to know how great SEO is unless you talk about how great SEO is.
Right, yeah. And this is, you know,
I'd love to hear how Marshall thinks about reporting, like, on the enterprise level that he works on, because, you know, he works across so many huge publishers and teams and such, and how do they go about doing that?
About reporting in general, you mean?
Yeah, reporting. I mean, I guess planning comes into it as well. Yeah.
Well, look, Omniture isn't the best to work with, as it turns out. I mean, I think Omniture and GA are both unnecessarily confusing. And so when you have to have teams that are around just pulling content, that inherently is problematic, but that's another topic. But that said, though, we look at reporting at a number of different levels. So we look at year over year, first off, just to show growth. And that's something that we want to make sure that because that just shows that things are working. We look at a rolling 3 months to hopefully maneuver around any kind of seasonality that may be or that may be affecting negatively or positively. We want to be able to look at that from a bit of a 5,000-foot view, and then we look at month to month. But honestly, we don't necessarily disclose month-to-month numbers, because that fills up my inbox, and it's for us to see a canary in the coal mine, to see if there's any anomalies or any problems that may be occurring, or any early warning systems. That's what we use it for, essentially. So we don't communicate month to month. Some clients really do want that, and they want to get even deeper into week to week, and some are rocking in a corner as they look at day to day, because that's just insane, because there's so much variations from how do people interact with content on a daily basis. I mean, we know that users are much more active on Mondays than they are on Saturdays, and we know that the news cycle, even if something really active is happening, people aren't necessarily reading on the weekends, and good on them for getting outside, hopefully. But those are things that are important to know for a release schedule, and that's the kind of information that we harvest and then we communicate. That if we're going to launch a new initiative, we want to do it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If there's a big social push, it's those first 3 days, because then interaction drops off precipitously. So that's the message that we convey. But from a reporting standpoint, that's not interesting to us, because again, what it does is it's noise. And when you're working in a large organization, we have to be sure to really filter it out, very high signal and very directive. And so that's what that rolling 3-month and that year-over-year will show us.
I really like that perspective a lot, and that's, I think, always an issue with any marketing campaign of any client. When you hyper focus on the micro, month to month, that absolutely fills up the inbox. And knowing that SEO is a long-term game, and almost every strategy we're implementing is meant to be a strategic growth, not necessarily tactical boost right here, right now. It reflects that better in reporting.
Yeah.
Well, we are reaching the top of the hour, and I really appreciate everyone's gracious responses. I mean, this is a meaty topic. You all had a lot of expertise and really wise wisdom to share with us. I was going to go into some question and answer, but we are at the end. So if you have time, let's just do one of the questions we received from the audience, and then we'll conclude the webinar. So this one reads, can you speak more on quantifying and qualifying the offline impact of SEO for enterprise? I think this was kind of directed towards Erin when she mentioned this is a struggle at Home Depot, where a majority of the revenue is coming from store sales, right? Less from organic traffic or that kind of thing. So maybe you can lead us off on this.
Yeah, sure. So we have an internal metric that we use to where we know for every $1 spent online, it equals about X in store. So I use that ratio to determine how I can impact my store sales. I can easily get online revenue based off of click-through rate and click-through curves from the SERP standpoint, and I just then forecast that out, timing that by the multiplier that we have for our in-store sales. That's the best and easiest way that I go to figuring out where that in-store stuff is.
Interesting. That's smart. I've heard of a pretty interesting plugin that it's like a UTM switcher plugin. So it has a unique phone number based on which medium the visitor comes to the website from. And then you can track calls to the specific phone number and tie each, at least the phone call numbers into whatever medium the visitor to the website came from. It just changes the phone number on whatever UTM parameter you're using. But that was an interesting one I heard for local business. John, Marshall, do you have any final thoughts you want to add before we conclude this webinar? All right, I suppose we're good.
I think real quick to that point specifically, it is interesting working with a company that has most of my experience has been in the just online only internet software space. At the enterprise level, but then also when I was working with this large hotel chain, it was interesting how we kind of worked across all the different hotel owners because it's a franchise and that sort of thing, and that was really an interesting lesson to me. And we were just focusing on SEO and driving traffic that way, but working alongside the other teams and making sure that the analytics was squared away, and we were able to kind of see how the different parts of it work together. And they're basically working towards that one sort of metric like Erin is talking about, where X amount spent online equals this amount in bookings or whatever. So yeah, I think that's definitely a unique challenge that future looking is going to be made will be really interesting with beacons and that sort of thing, and everyone having a smartphone in their pocket and all of that. And I'm personally really excited to see how that evolves.
Yeah, well, and that's the Internet of Things, and I know Will Critchlow talks about that a lot in terms of how everything is probably going to shift fairly radically as everything kind of becomes connected to the internet, and who's going to be optimized for voice search of the refrigerator, buy milk, and Amazon delivers by drone, and all that.
And voice search in general, I think, is a big one. We're getting asked about that quite a bit, and right now it seems to be thrown into the dark search bucket, which is very difficult to track. So we're waiting for some clarity on that, and it's just going to take time. Right.
Well, thank you again, Erin, John, Marshall, for joining me today for this webinar and all of the knowledge you've shared in this session. It's been really great. Really appreciate the time you took out to do this with us. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
With that, I hope you all have a great Wednesday, and this will be available by recording later. So there's a few more questions we didn't get to by the audience. I'll forward those to all of you, and feel free to reach out to the audience members that had these questions, and hopefully we can get them some more answers too. But thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.